Bonjour French 1, this is your section 2.2 video notes, all about contractions with the word a. So to get started, we actually need to know what the word a means. And in French, the word a usually means to or at. It can mean both words at the same time, which I realize is a little confusing, but we'll kind of try to clarify this for you in this video. When you use a in front of certain words, basically the words le, la, le, or l'apostrophe, which we know all mean the, they sometimes form a contraction. So if you think about it, if you were trying to create a French sentence and say something like, I like to go to the park, for example. I like is j'aime, to go is aller, and then to, we just said, is a, and sorry that it doesn't have the accent mark on it here. It would take me a second to bring it up here, and then the park is le parc. There is a weird rule in the French language that says that a and le can never be right next to each other. Anytime you have a and le right next to each other, they magically squish together and become the word o. So there's two ways to think about this. Some people like to actually think about the contractions and think about how I would have written a and le, but instead I know that they have to go together and become o. The other way to think about that, instead of making it think about this kind of mathematic looking situation where each of the words combines to make a certain phrase, is you could just memorize that the masculine word for to or at is o, the feminine one is a la, and so on and so forth. Basically, if you're talking about going to or being at a masculine place, you use o. If you talk about going to or being at a feminine place, you use a la. It's up to you how you want to look at it. Some people really like to know where it comes from. Some people just want to memorize masculine is o, feminine is a la. I go ahead and show my work here so you see where it's coming from. Basically, the only exceptions to the rule are a and le. And then in the rather not happening often situation of a and le. So let's say something like we are going, we like to go to the stores. So we say to, which is a, and then the for something plural like stores would be le. There's a weird rule in the French language that a and le can never be next to each other. Instead, a and le, anytime they're right next to each other, are magically joined together in a wonderful union and they become o, a-u-x. Now again, you can just memorize that for plural places the word for to is o-a-u-x, or this is where it comes from. Now the cool thing is that the feminine version and the version for words that come before a vowel are actually just the combination of the two words themselves. They're not considered to be a contraction because they're not contracting together and becoming a whole new word in and of themselves. If you say to the feminine place, like a la piscine, you don't have to combine a and la, it just stays a la. If you say to the place that starts with a vowel and you wanted to say something like à l'école with a l'apostrophe, it would stay a l'apostrophe. It doesn't change. So basically you have to start paying attention to not only which word for the you use, but also if you're using it for the word to the place, you have to make sure you know whether it's to the masculine place, to the feminine place, to the place that starts with a vowel, or to the plural place. So having said that, what I have for you here is a nice chart that kind of keeps everything sorted out that we've learned so far. I'll try to go through it very quickly. Basically, so far we learned the words a, an, and some. Remember, a or an are the words an and une. This gets used for masculine items, une gets used for feminine items. So if you wanted to say a park, it would be un parc, because park happens to be masculine. If you wanted to say a pool, you would say une piscine, because pool happens to be feminine. Remember that de gets used with some if it becomes plural, and then de or d apostrophe gets used after the word pa, but that's a really weird situation that doesn't happen a lot. Definite articles are basically the word the. For masculine places like the park, we're going to keep with the same examples here, it'd be le parc. For feminine places like the pool, it'd be la piscine. For places that happen to start with the vowel, it'd be l'apostrophe, so the school, l'école. And then for plural places, it would change to les, which doesn't happen a whole lot. So then finally, the new thing we're just learning here is if you want to talk about going to the masculine place, like to the park, you would say au parc. If you want to talk about going to the feminine place, like to the pool, it would be à la piscine. And if you wanted to talk about going to the place that starts with a vowel, like to the school, it would be à l'école. Finally, in the weird chance that it happens to be a plural place, to the plural place would be au, a-u-x. Again, this just kind of summarizes everything we've learned so far so that you can kind of compare and contrast what we've learned thus far. So having said that, eventually the ultimate goal is going to be for you to be able to use these contractions or these words for to or at in actual sentences. So if, for example, you wanted to say, I like to go to the movies. Normally, the words for to and the for something like movie, the word to would be a. Again, sorry, I'm missing my accent mark. And then the for movie theater, which happens to be masculine, is le. If you look back at your notes, though, you'll see that a and le are not a legal combination in the French language. When they find themselves next to each other, they squish together and magically become the whole new word o. If you wanted to say he loves to go to the library, the word for to would be a. The word the for something feminine like library, you might have to look it up on your notes, but it's la. And if you look at your notes again, à la bibliothèque totally makes sense. It's what you use to say going to a feminine place, and the words à and la can live happily next to each other in the French language. If you wanted to say, we don't like to go to school, if you want to say to school or to the school, you have to say to, which is a. And then the word the le, la, le that you use before school, because it starts with a vowel, is L apostrophe. If you take a look, you'll notice that L apostrophe is a totally wonderful combination in the French language. It's actually the word for to or at for a place that starts with a vowel, just like school, so we have our correct answer there. Finally, if you want to say, I talk to the teachers, the way you would say to the for teachers is you would say to, which is a, and then because teachers is plural, you'd use that plural the. Now, unfortunately, when you look back at your sentence, you should be noticing that a and le is not a legal combination in the French language. Anytime a and le find themselves next to each other, they magically combine to that brand new word for plural places or people in this case. If you want to say to the something plural, it has to be o, A-U-X. If this isn't all sinking in right off the bat, don't stress. Bring your notes with you to class, and we're going to practice it a lot during class today and hopefully clarify.